What's going on, everybody? GoodMicWork Commentaries back at you with yet another Patreon donation video. This video comes courtesy of an awesomely loyal supporter of the channel, John Rediford. John, you've been a fan of this channel for I don't know how long now, but I know I've seen your name a lot. I really appreciate your generosity and your support and your patience with me getting this video up. You made this donation, I believe, in early October, and at the time I had a couple of videos ahead of you, and then after that I was heading off to Los Angeles for Survivor Series, and I knew it was probably going to be early December until I finally got this thing up. So I very much appreciate your patience, and I very much appreciate your support and your donation and all of the kind words you said to me in your original message. Now, you have picked one hell of a subject to discuss tonight because this is a big rivalry. Shawn Michaels and Triple H is one of the more storied rivalries in WWE history. Even though it was somewhat short-lived, the actual rivalry itself was only a few years, but they did a lot in those 4 years, and there's a ton of stuff to discuss tonight, and I'm really looking forward to doing this episode. And when you suggested this topic, I was immediately started grinning. I'm like, right on. This is something that I can really have fun with, sink my teeth into, and enjoy. So we're going to discuss the rivalry between Shawn Michaels and Triple H. I'll go back in time a little bit and discuss the origins of D-Generation X and kind of go through things year by year, discussing all of the interactions that Shawn Michaels and Triple H had in the last 20 or so years. This should be a lot of fun. Before we get started, though, I do want to let you guys know a couple of things. If this is something that might interest you and you would like to donate to the channel in the future and have a video of your own done, any one-time donation on Patreon or on PayPal, which you can access right on my website, GoodMicWorkCommentaries.com, any one-time donation of $100 or more will get you a video discussing any wrestling-related topic that you want. As long as it involves wrestling, I'll talk about it. So if you would like to take part in that, the links to everything you need to know are in the description below. Also, make sure you subscribe to my channel if you have not yet already. We are getting really close to 25,000 subscribers on the YouTube channel, so that's pretty exciting. Also, give this video a like. John is an awesome fan, and he was very patient waiting for this video, so let's hook him up with at least 300 likes. That would be really, really swell. If you're a social media user, please give me a follow over on Twitter. That's generally the next best thing to my YouTube channel. If any sort of wrestling story breaks or there's any news out there that you want my immediate opinion on, make sure you follow me on Twitter. I am always vocal over there. Like all of my podcasts, this episode will also be available for download on my website, GoodMicWorkCommentaries.com, or you can catch me over on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, or Spotify. I've got some pretty sweet-ass merchandise as well, so make sure you check out my Pro Wrestling Tees store. Like I said, links to everything right below. Now that all of the formalities are out of the way, we can jump into today's subject, and that, of course, is the rivalry between Shawn Michaels and Triple H. And they had a hell of a run together. They had a lot of great matches. I was talking to you guys a lot this previous week on Twitter, asking you a few questions about Shawn Michaels and Triple H matches and which ones you liked the most and which were your favorites. And I had jotted down pretty much all of the matches they had. And judging from you guys, we have a lot of the same opinions about a lot of these matches that span several years between Shawn and Triple H. But before we get into their very heated rivalry, let's talk about their friendship. Dates all the way back to 1995 when Triple H first came in to the WWE from WCW. And it's a very famous story how the Clique basically scooped him up right away. As soon as he was there, they threw him in the car with him. And within a few months, he was a full-blown Clique member. And he had a lot of heat right out of the gate. But that's really where the friendship between Shawn Michaels and Triple H started, along with Kevin Nash and Scott Hall and X-Pac, of course. And I always remember, back in the day, back in the 90s, all we really had was some newsletters and some hotlines. So there were some discussions and there was some chatter going around about this little faction, this little backstage faction that these guys had. I think I first heard the word Clique somewhere around 1996. And it's funny, too. It was, I want to say it was the first Slammy Awards they did in the 90s. I think that was the 96 Slammies. And Shawn Michaels was sitting in the front row with Jose Lothario. And I think Triple H, or Hunter Hearst Helmsley at the time, was presenting an award. And when I don't even remember who he was presenting it to or what the award even was. Don't remember. But I remember when Triple H was leaving the stage, he kind of glanced over at Shawn Michaels and gave him like a funny look. And I remember watching that and saying, wow, he just broke character. He just looked his buddy right in the face and gave him a little smirk, even though Shawn Michaels is 24 hours away from going into WrestleMania and beating Bret Hart and becoming the new world champion, and Triple H is a piece of shit, useless heel that's about to get annihilated by the Ultimate Warrior on that very same show. So I really thought that was kind of cool. That was the first time I ever noticed an interaction between the two, and then there was a little bit more there than what we saw. They had a couple of matches as heel and babyface before they had any sort of on-screen alliance with each other at all. I know there was a match on Raw in May of 1996. I think this was around Beware of Dog time, and it was Shawn Michaels versus Triple H. Of course, Triple H would lose that. I'm not even 100% sure if it was a title match. I don't think it was, but I remember watching it that night live on TV in my own home, and there was a spot in the match where Shawn, I think, grabbed Triple H by the nose, and that's really the only time I can remember them facing each other on television. That was it between the two of them, at least on screen. And it wasn't until 1997, long after Kevin Nash was gone, Scott Hall was gone, the NWO was in full force in WCW. They were kicking the fucking shit out of the WWE in the ratings. I mean, just destroying them. And there have been stories that Shawn Michaels has told where he said that they went to management, they went to the powers that be, they went to Vince McMahon and said, put us together. And 1997 was a very tumultuous year for Shawn Michaels, as it was. Early that year, he lost his smile in February and forfeited the title. He didn't work WrestleMania. He then returned only to have a backstage fight with Bret Hart and leave again. And that's when he came back and he was the referee at SummerSlam and started his feud with The Undertaker, and then would be back in the ring full time. But it was right around that time of his feud with The Undertaker that they finally put Triple H and Shawn Michaels together. And I remember when it happened. It was on Monday Night Raw, late August, early September, and it was from Atlantic City. It was in the same building that WrestleMania 4 and 5 were in. And I can't remember the sequence of events. I think it was one week it was Shawn versus Mankind one-on-one, and then the next week they put Triple H and Shawn Michaels together as a team to take on Mankind and The Undertaker. And I believe that was the night where Shawn bloodied up The Undertaker's face with the steel chair. That was around the time when Rick Rude came around. I think it was the same set of shows or the same tapings that we saw Rick Rude. And that was the first alliance between Shawn Michaels and Triple H. And I even remember there was a backstage interview with Triple H prior to that tag team match where he's kind of like complaining about it a little bit, as if he really didn't want to team up with Shawn. And then when the two of them finally came together and formed their bond, they were as strong as ever. And it almost seemed like WWE was even hesitant to put them together because Shawn was a huge star, probably the top guy in the company or one of the top guys in the company. And Triple H at that time was not a main eventer. He was feuding with Mankind throughout the summer in mid-card matches. Mankind beat him in the cage match at SummerSlam. So they were basically thrown together on television because of their common enemies, and you could tell that WWE really wasn't sure if they wanted to keep them together, but they had instant chemistry, and it's good that they put them together. That's what they should do, because wrestling was getting a little bit more realistic and a little bit more adult-based, and a lot of people by that point who were listening to hotlines or reading dirt sheets, and some by this point were even on the internet, because it was just starting to become a thing. A lot of people kind of knew about the relationship between the members of the clique, so it would only make sense to put Shawn Michaels and Triple H together, and that's when they did, and I believe it was right after Hell in the Cell, Bad Blood in 1997, that they officially coined themselves D-Generation X, and then they were off and running. And it's funny, when you look back at the legacy of DX, what a legendary faction and group that was, and how it was really a game changer for WWE. That initial D-Generation X was so incredibly short-lived. When you look back on it, it only lasted a few months. Hell, it lasted less than that. Rick Rude was only a part of that group for about 2 months until the screw job, and he would take off for WCW, leaving Shawn, Triple H, and Chyna until WrestleMania. And then, of course, Shawn Michaels would go into WrestleMania 14 to drop the belt to Steve, the whole deal with Mike Tyson, and then he was gone. He had the injured back, and he was going to be off of TV to get back surgery, and that's kind of where the rivalry started. It looked like, and I remember watching this back in the day, they were setting up for a Shawn Michaels versus Triple H match, because I think in everybody's mind, I know in my mind at the time when Shawn left, I was not expecting him to be gone for 4 years. I was expecting him to be gone for 4 months. I really did not think he was going to be gone that long. I was aware of the back injury. We all knew about it. And I even remember being very nervous that his WrestleMania match with Austin was in jeopardy, because if you remember, he missed the In Your House the month before. And Triple H kind of captained the team in that big 8-man tag or whatever it was at No Way Out. So there was a lot of concern that Shawn wouldn't even make WrestleMania. So we knew he needed to take time off, and we knew he was going to be gone for a while, but I was not expecting it to be a 4-year hiatus. And I thought they were going to set up Triple H to be the new leader of DX. That way, when Shawn comes back, that's a natural conflict there. That's a natural storyline that's just waiting for you, sitting there on a silver platter. And they never really got around to doing it. But they tried, because if you remember, the night after WrestleMania 14, Triple H came out there and basically called out Shawn Michaels, told him that he dropped the ball and that he was going to be picking it up, and that it's his team now, and he's going to form the DX Army, and the first thing he's going to do is bring back X-Pac, and that's when X-Pac returned. One of my favorite nights ever, and one of my favorite moments ever in WWE Raw history is when Triple H brought X-Pac back, and that's when you could start feeling things shifting. Now finally, instead of everybody jumping to WCW, some guys were starting to come over to WWE, and some guys were starting to come back to WWE. So Triple H basically calling Shawn Michaels out the night after he lost to Stone Cold Steve Austin, saying that he was the new leader of DX, I thought was going to make for a great confrontation when Shawn returned. But unfortunately, he never really did. He did come back in the summer, but only to be a color commentator. And then later on in 1998, they made him the commissioner. And they even tried something in late 98. Remember, there was an episode of Raw. I think it was basically just done to get Shawn off of TV for whatever reason. I don't know. I can't recall at the time, but there was a segment on Raw where Shawn was attacked in the parking lot. Something like that happened to him, and DX is kind of standing around, observing this. And actually, before Shawn left to go out into the parking lot, DX were the last ones to see him, and they were pretending to be his friend. They were hugging, and you could tell that WWE was maybe trying to set up something for the future where it would turn out to be DX as the ones that attacked Shawn Michaels, but they never got a chance to really follow through with that either. The DX WWE video that they released around 1998, I have the VHS tape of that. And that's when DX enters the truck. That's when Billy Gunn and Road Dogg and X-Pac are all a part of DX by this point. And they're in the production truck, and they're fucking with Michael Cole and playing with all of the equipment. And the phone rings, and Michael Cole picks it up and says it's Shawn Michaels. And then Triple H, I think, grabs the phone and hangs up on him and says, "What are you doing, you fucking idiot?" So even in the video, they were teasing that eventually we're going to get that clash between the former leader of DX and the current leader of DX. And it's such a shame we never got that. Now, Shawn and Triple H, as I'm about to talk about here, went on to give us a ton of awesome matches and gave us a great rivalry. But I think this chapter would have been really nice to have in this story. If Shawn Michaels was able to come back just a little bit earlier than he did, it would have been really fun to see Shawn working with Triple H in 98, 99, 2000. That would have been some fun shit. And especially, when you add D-Generation X into the mix, where the alliances are going to be with the members of the faction and stuff, I thought it could have been a lot of fun if they were able to do it, but they never really were. Shawn Michaels also had a ton of personal issues. He was kind of a mess in 1999 and 2000. And I think it was around 2001. I think it was the night of the WCW buyout that he was officially just let go from WWE. He was backstage all fucked up and pilled out of his mind and drooling all over himself. And I think they let him go, and he had a brief falling out with Triple H in real life around that time as well. And during that time when he was away, that's kind of when he cleaned himself up. He did marry Nitro Girl Whisper a couple of years before this. And his addiction problems and his personal issues finally reached the point where his wife couldn't take it anymore. And that's when Shawn found religion and changed his ways. And he's pretty much never looked back. I know a lot of people have issues with Shawn Michaels. Hell, I was really bummed out to see that Shawn Michaels blocked me on Twitter. How crazy is that? I've never said an unkind word about the guy other than a few criticisms of his past behavior, but I seriously doubt Shawn Michaels listens to my episodes. So in order for Shawn Michaels to ever hear me say anything negative about him, he's going to have to dig pretty deep. I have always idolized Shawn Michaels, and that's coming from a Bret Hart fan. And I never really had an issue with Shawn Michaels at all. And it wasn't until I was asking you guys some questions on Twitter just a few days ago that I realized that he blocked me. And I can't even think of why. So let's do a little test here. Let's see how many people actually care enough to go over to Twitter, tweet Shawn Michaels, make sure you tag me in it, and say, Shawn Michaels, unblock GoodMicWork. He fucking loves you. And if we can't, whatever. I guess Shawn Michaels is just pissed that I look better bald. But once Shawn Michaels kind of started getting a hold of himself around 2001 and 2002 and, becoming active in his church and, just strengthening his marriage. And then, they were having kids by this point. And Shawn, to his credit, did clean himself up. Shawn is still not a perfect human being. There have been a few stories about him here or there being an asshole or a dirtbag or something like that. But as far as his addiction issues go, as far as his health issues go, Shawn Michaels was reborn in 2002, and he wound up coming back into the WWE. I believe he mended fences with Triple H, probably had a meeting with Vince McMahon. They brought him back in to kind of be on TV again, and that was around, I guess, the summer of 2002, if I remember right. That's when he came back and joined the NWO. And how weird was that to see? Shawn Michaels, how long was he in the NWO? For what, 5.5 days or something? It was so ridiculously short-lived. Just a few weeks at best. And seeing him come out there was really cool because seeing him in the ring again with Kevin Nash and him wearing the NWO t-shirt, that's something that I always thought we were likely to see in WCW. There were a few times there where I felt Shawn was going to make the jump if he could. He wanted the fuck out of WWE in 1997 so bad. In hindsight now, he's probably really happy he never made that move. Would have completely fucked up his legacy, but I remember being scared as a fan that Shawn was going to go off and join his clique buddies in WCW and be a part of the NWO. I'm really glad that didn't happen. But seeing Shawn wearing that NWO shirt, doing his little pose with Kevin Nash was crazy. We could have easily seen that on Nitro if things would have gone a little bit differently. But the NWO thing wouldn't last long, and Shawn would then try to briefly reform for another cup of coffee, D-Generation X with Triple H. That was on Raw, where Triple H, I remember, tossed him the t-shirt in the locker room, or maybe it was vice versa, and Jim Ross was kind of speculating on commentary. He goes, I think I know where they're going here. And then later on, Shawn Michaels and Triple H come out to reform DX, and that's when Triple H turns on them. They're doing their big salute. They're about to do, we got 2 words for you, suck it thing. And that's when Triple H kicks Shawn, nails him with the pedigree, and turns heel. And then after that was when Shawn was attacked backstage. Am I right about this? Is this when Shawn was attacked in the parking lot? First he reformed DX with Triple H and got turned on. Then he was attacked in the garage and his head was thrown through the car window. And that's when Triple H, even though he turned heel, he was still vowing to find out who did that to Shawn. He swore up and down it wasn't him. And that would lead to the pretty famous segment on Raw where Shawn is doing an interview via satellite on the Titantron and his face is all bruised up and Triple H is in the ring vowing to find out who it was. And then Shawn Michaels says they found security footage from the parking garage and it shows that it was Triple H who attacked Shawn Michaels. And that's when Triple H kind of smiles at the camera and says, "You're damn right it was me, Shawn." It was great stuff. It was almost like he turned heel twice. And that's when Shawn laid down the challenge for SummerSlam, and he was officially back. And I remember around that time, all of the internet sites were reporting that Shawn was going to be returning to the ring, and when he made that challenge on Monday Night Raw, I was thrilled. I'm like, finally, this guy is back. I've been waiting for 4 damn years for this guy to make his return, hell, 4.5 years, and I wasn't even sure if Shawn could compete at the level that he was at before, because if you remember back in, 2000, remember he was the referee for the Triple H and Rock Iron Man match? He was in terrible shape in 2000. I think just the drugs and alcohol and everything that he was doing, he wasn't getting in the gym, he wasn't working out. He didn't look like he was in really good shape, but he got himself not only cleaned up personally, but he got back in the gym and he came back looking amazing and got himself ready for a SummerSlam match, which at the time they were saying was supposed to be a one-off. I guess he was going to come in, work one return match and maybe not come back again, or maybe come back just for a couple of matches here or there. And they even set the whole thing up as a street fight. So we weren't even going to get the old Shawn Michaels with the Shawn Michaels tights and the whole deal. He was going to be out there in street clothes and jeans, trying to face Triple H in this unsanctioned brawl at SummerSlam. And, according to the poll that I put up on Twitter, I asked you guys, I took the 4 best matches or the 4 biggest matches that these two have ever had and had you guys vote on it, and SummerSlam 2002 won by far as the favorite Shawn Michaels versus Triple H match of all time. So the very first time they faced each other on a big stage was everyone's favorite, and that's very telling, and it just goes to show you what a freak of nature Shawn Michaels is, because you watch that match back, it's as if he wrestled the day before. It's as if he never took a day off from wrestling ever. He came back like he didn't miss a beat. He looked like $1,000,000. He had a brutal war with Triple H. There was chair shots and there was ladders and there was tables and there was blood from both guys, sledgehammers, just all sorts of brutality in this match, which is pretty scary for a guy coming back after 4 years not being in the ring and not used to taking this type of punishment. This motherfucker's diving off the top rope onto the floor through tables onto Triple H. I love that shot of him climbing to the top rope and he kind of just shrugs his shoulders and he points to his head like, yep, I'm out of my fucking mind, and then dives off right on top of Triple H. Great stuff. When it comes down to all of the matches that they've had that I'm going to talk about here in a minute, this one as well, I think, was my favorite. And Shawn Michaels was victorious upon his return. Triple H did the job for him. Shawn caught him with kind of like a roll-up move at the end and got the pin. And that's when they decided to do the angle where Shawn Michaels got nailed in the back by Triple H's sledgehammer. Triple H, of course, attacked Shawn after the match and put Shawn back on the shelf, because I think at the time they weren't expecting Shawn to come back. So they did the whole angle where he was injured. He had to be carried away on a stretcher. He was even in a wheelchair on TV for a little while until the injury just miraculously went away. I forgot where he was. I know he was at WWE New York, or he was at the big restaurant in Times Square. It was either a Monday Night Raw or Sunday Night Heat or some shit like that. And he rolls his ass out there in the wheelchair only just to stand up like nothing's wrong, and he's back. So Shawn would then return to enter the Elimination Chamber, the first ever Elimination Chamber at Survivor Series 2002 in Madison Square Garden. The Elimination Chamber was the concept that Eric Bischoff introduced when he was commissioner, and he put Shawn Michaels in the match. He was in there with a bunch of guys, Booker T, Rob Van Dam, Triple H, I can't remember who else, Jericho, Kane maybe, and wound up winning the World Heavyweight title. Shawn Michaels, in his second match back, becomes world champion. And I always remember that match because Shawn had that little stable boy haircut and he had those shit brown tights on and he looked terrible. Triple H got seriously injured in that match. I can't remember who did it. It was either Shawn or Rob Van Dam. Somebody hurt Triple H pretty good. And that was a pretty brutal match. I've never really been a fan of the Elimination Chamber match itself. I just think it's fucking ridiculous and it's way over the top and a lot crazier than anything I really need to see. But I like this first one because of Shawn. Shawn coming back and winning the title in the Garden. Shawn has not had a lot of luck in Madison Square Garden. 6 years prior to that, at Survivor Series in 1996, the entire arena turned their back on him and were cheering for Sid. So that was kind of a nice full circle moment for Shawn, losing the title in the Garden and coming back to win another one several years later. And I would never get used to seeing Shawn Michaels with that World Heavyweight title. You realize that's the only title, the only world title he held since he came back. He had that quick run, maybe 1 month, with the World Heavyweight title, and he was never world champion again. And I've mentioned that several times about Shawn Michaels, how, you always heard the stories back in the day, how he was very political, never wanted to drop any belts. And you always heard these horror stories about how Shawn doesn't want to do jobs, and he always wants to be on top, and he always wants the spotlight. He came back in 2002, and I think WWE gave him the spotlight. He wasn't demanding it. I think WWE wanted to put the belt on him, and he won it at the Elimination Chamber, and he would wind up dropping it the next month back to Triple H at Armageddon, and that was the last time Shawn Michaels would be world champion. And he just didn't look right with that big gold belt. That's another thing. I said how it was eerie to see Shawn Michaels wearing the NWO shirt on WWE, because we could have easily seen him doing that on Nitro. And if he would have gone to WCW, he might have won that world title over there, and he would have had that big belt around his waist. And I always thought, because Shawn's not a big guy, and I always thought the Winged Eagle belt looked much better on him. Just watching him come down to the ring during that time, he had a match with Rob Van Dam, I think on Monday Night Raw in late 2002 there, before his match with Triple H at Armageddon, and just seeing him come down to the ring with that belt just didn't look right. It still doesn't look right. I still can't really get used to it when I see it. Whenever I think of Shawn as being a world champion, I think of him with the Winged Eagle belt, not the WCW belt. But it was a very short run for him. He had the 3 stages of hell with Triple H at Armageddon. That match was on the list of their greatest of all time. I liked this match. It definitely wasn't my favorite, but it was a really good match. And Triple H wound up winning the title back, tipping Shawn over on the ladder, over the top rope, through several tables, allowing Triple H to climb up to the top and retrieve the World Heavyweight title and win that back. And then after that, Shawn would start to become a little bit more full-time. That's when he entered the Royal Rumble in 2003 and started his feud with Chris Jericho, and he would face him at WrestleMania. Kevin Nash would come back shortly after WrestleMania, and he would be feuding with Triple H. So Shawn Michaels and Triple H did not have a whole lot of interaction in 2003. The only match I can remember between the two of them was December 29th, 2003. It was in San Antonio, Shawn's hometown, on Monday Night Raw. World Heavyweight title on the line, Triple H versus Shawn Michaels. And that match, I think, was better than their Armageddon match. I probably should have put that on my Twitter poll the other day because this one was so good and was such a fun, wild ride. I remember I was here in San Diego. At the time, I was living in North Carolina, but my family was living here, so I would fly out here every year for Christmas to visit them for a week, and I would always go home very late. Sometimes I would even come back to North Carolina in the beginning of the year, and I remember being in my parents' living room in 2003 visiting when this match aired, and I remember watching the whole thing fucking marking out. Even my dad was nearby. He goes, "Is that Shawn Michaels?" Because he's somewhat familiar with wrestling, and my parents always knew that I was a huge wrestling fan, and they would always let me watch wrestling in their house, which was so cool. But I remember being home for Christmas that year and watching that great match with Shawn Michaels and Triple H. Shawn, we thought had won the title. He super kicked Triple H, landed on top of him. There was all sorts of shit going on during the match. Eric Bischoff was out there. Ric Flair was out there. Earl, I think, was the referee and got knocked out. So they had no ref for the match. So Eric Bischoff wound up getting in and started reffing the match. And at the end, when Shawn hit Triple H with a super kick and fell on him, Shawn Michaels' shoulders were also on the mat. And you could tell that. Eric Bischoff counted the 3 anyway. Shawn's music started playing. The crowd is going nuts. Eric Bischoff says, "Your winner," and still World Heavyweight Champion Triple H, and the crowd just immediately goes silent. And he shows a replay on the Tron, shows Shawn Michaels' shoulders were also down. It was one of those the tie goes to the runner type of situations, and he awarded Triple H the World Heavyweight title and said he's still the champ. That pisses Shawn Michaels off, and he decks Eric Bischoff, and that was right after Survivor Series 2 when Shawn had to fight for Austin's job in WWE, and he lost. So Austin, he returned at the end of this thing because right after Shawn Michaels nailed Bischoff, he gets on the mic and says, "Shawn Michaels, you're fired." And Shawn Michaels stayed fired for about 45 seconds. Austin makes his way to the ring. He announces that he's back and he's the new sheriff in town. And he immediately rehires Shawn Michaels and grants him a rematch. And I believe that would wind up being the match they would have at the Royal Rumble a few weeks later. And that was a last man standing match. This match was fun too. I went back and watched all of these matches in preparation to do this video. And I really liked this last man standing match. I think the only weakness in the last man standing match is that it really didn't have a winner. But the match itself was a lot of fun, and it was nice to see the Triple H and Shawn Michaels rivalry, being picked back up in 2004, just adding to their insane story. But it was a bloody match, very, very bloody brawl, and I think both guys were counted out in the ring, if I remember right. I think that was the finish. Shawn, I think, hit Triple H with another super kick at the end. Neither man could answer the 10 count. They were both carried out on a stretcher. Shawn actually jumped off the stretcher and insisted on walking, but the story that was told in this is that both guys just refused to lose. They're going to do whatever it takes to not lose to the other. Jerry Lawler was saying a few times that, he doesn't think either guy is really concerned about winning. They're just more concerned about not losing. And that was kind of the theme during that match. But that was a really good match at the Royal Rumble. One of the best Royal Rumble title matches ever. We've had some awesome title matches throughout the years. The year before, Chris Benoit and Kurt Angle tore the house down as well. So this was a fun time, and there were some awesome matches taking place in 2003 and 2004 between these guys. And that, of course, would lead to the big triple threat match at WrestleMania 20 between Shawn Michaels, Triple H, and Chris Benoit. And I remember, it's a shame that we can never really look back on this with any fondness because I thought this was such a big night in the company's history. This is something that on paper you would never think you would see. Chris Benoit, a guy that's made his career primarily outside of the WWE. He's well-traveled internationally, and he had a lot of success in WCW. And then a WCW guy comes over to WWE and main events their biggest show in history, the 20th anniversary of WrestleMania, and he's in there in a triple threat match against the two most powerful wrestlers in the locker room. One of them's married to Stephanie, the other one's Shawn fucking Michaels. When you look at those three, who in the world thinks that Chris Benoit is going to be able to win this match? But he did. It was one of my favorite WrestleMania matches ever, and it still pisses me off that Benoit did what he did, and we can never really celebrate this the way it should have been. It's pretty incredible that happens. And Eddie Guerrero, too. Eddie Guerrero defeated Kurt Angle earlier on in the night, and him and Chris shared a hug to close out WrestleMania 20. I thought it was just a great moment, and I thought it was really awesome for Shawn Michaels and Triple H to put over Benoit like that. And they would do it again. Didn't they do it like the next month at Backlash? And that's when Shawn Michaels tapped out to the sharpshooter from Benoit. So, it's a small chapter in the rivalry of Triple H and Shawn Michaels, but it's definitely worth mentioning what these guys did when they worked with Chris Benoit. And that would pretty much lead us to the blow-off. I mean, it's crazy when you think about it. 2004 was basically the end of the rivalry. We're going to talk about a few other things that they did, but 2004, I think the Hell in the Cell match at Bad Blood, that was the definitive end, I believe, to the rivalry between Shawn Michaels and Triple H. That match went nearly an hour. I think it was 47 minutes long. I watched that just the other day as well. Watched it from start to finish, and it was a hell of a ride. I enjoyed the Hell in the Cell match. Again, much like the Last Man Standing match, it was a very good match, but I'm not sure if it was my overall favorite. I'm with all of you who say that SummerSlam 2002 was the best, but watching those two guys brutalize each other was a lot of fun. It was just a hell of a story between the two. The constant one-upmanship, the constant jockeying for position in the company, which man is better, and Triple H, he really thrived when Shawn Michaels left. For him to make it to that level and win a lot more world titles than Shawn Michaels ever did, you certainly would not have seen that coming in 1996. And here we fast forward through all these years. They've had all of these great, amazing matches with each other and a really, really storied rivalry. And then they end things in Hell in the Cell, a match that Shawn Michaels kind of invented. He was in the first one ever. And then Triple H went on to have a few great ones. I mean, he faced, I think he beat Chris Jericho a couple years before that. Then he went on to defeat Kevin Nash in a Hell in the Cell, and now he's facing Shawn Michaels. It's like 3 years in a row, Hell in the Cell matches for Triple H, and he winds up defeating Shawn Michaels in just an epic match. Epic fucking match. Both guys were just laying there in a pool of their own blood, and Triple H wins by the skin of his teeth, and it's worth a watch. If it's a match you haven't taken a look back at in a while, fire up the network and take a look, because it was a classic, man. A classic fucking match that went a long time. It's hard to wrestle for 45 minutes in a match that brutal, and those guys did. They were two of the best in the business at that time, and Triple H gets a really bad rap. That was during the Reign of Terror years. That was during the Evolution years, and a lot of people had a really sour taste in their mouth when it came to Triple H. But none of that takes away from his wrestling ability. The guy was a great worker, put on great matches, told great stories, and I thought he was a great wrestling character. And during that time, I believe he was trying to follow in the footsteps of a Ric Flair. He was trying to be the modern day Ric Flair, even making his own Four Horsemen with his idol playing the role of J.J. Dillon, essentially. And I always really enjoyed those years, even though Triple H was just destroying everybody, and it was really rubbing everybody the wrong way. I mean, hell, he did tap out at WrestleMania, so what more do you want? He would go on to lose the next year at WrestleMania as well to Batista. He would go on to lose the WrestleMania after that to John Cena. We didn't really get them back together again on screen on a regular basis until 2006 when they reformed D-Generation X. And I remember there was stories online about that too during that time. I even remember at WrestleMania that year, WrestleMania 22, when Shawn Michaels worked with Vince McMahon and he stood up on the big ladder to do the big elbow drop on Vince, who I think had the trash can over his head. And he did the crotch chop on the ladder and jumped off. And that was right around the same time we were hearing rumors about DX reuniting. Even that very same night, Triple H went into his championship match with John Cena as a heel, but got primarily cheered. So the fans were starting to get over their anger of Triple H's reign of terror and kind of redirect their anger at John Cena, who was now starting to rub them the wrong way. And that allowed Triple H and Shawn Michaels to come back together and reform D-Generation X. And I've always said this throughout the years that I wasn't a huge fan of the reunion. I just never was. To me, there was no topping those 1997 days. And even when Triple H took things over in 1998 with X-Pac and the Outlaws, those were the glory days of DX to me. And I never thought WWE would ever be able to come close to recreating that. They did a little bit. DX had their moments, but I didn't really enjoy the type of humor they were doing by this point. It felt a little more raw. It felt a little more edgy back in the 90s. The 2006 version was a little bit more scripted, and it was just, I never thought it was, as good as it used to be. And at the time, I kind of thought that that was going to lead to maybe another rivalry between the two. Maybe these two guys were going to have one more run with each other, but they never really did. They had a couple of matches they were both involved in. I think it was, you guys got to help me out here. Was it 2009, the Survivor Series? They had the triple threat match, Shawn Michaels, Triple H, and John Cena. John Cena would wind up winning that, but still, that doesn't really count as part of the rivalry. I think they were back together as DX by that point. Yeah, they were, because that was right before Bret Hart made his return to the company, and Shawn Michaels would retire just a few months after that match at Survivor Series. So DX was reformed in 2006, and then I think they had another reunion around 2009 and 2010. And since then, Shawn and Triple H have been on pretty good terms. Shawn Michaels was the referee for the big Hell in the Cell match at WrestleMania between Triple H and The Undertaker, and he did get involved physically in that. And that was a pretty special moment with the three of them kind of walking up the ramp together, the end of an era match, which turned out to not be fucking true, of course. That pretty much wrapped it up in 2004. And aside from a couple of matches where they were on opposite sides or a triple threat or whatever, that was pretty much it. And by the time we got to 2010 at WrestleMania 26, Shawn was retired. So, like I said, their feud and their rivalry was short-lived, but it was really entertaining and it was very storied. And as I was getting opinions from you guys on social media this week, some of you were saying that the work that Shawn Michaels and Triple H did wasn't your favorite. This wasn't a lot of people's favorite rivalries. It doesn't have to be your favorite, but I've always thought it was a good one and a very, very significant one and legendary one in WWE. I mean, this one's right up there with Austin and McMahon and Rock and Triple H and Mankind and Undertaker, any of those type of rivalries you want to think of. I definitely put this one up there as one of the best in WWE history because every single time these two guys got in the ring together, their matches were great. These were all kick-ass matches. These two guys worked really well together. They had great chemistry. Their promos were good. The builds to all these matches, I remember being really fun. They had great video packages, chronicling their history and their story prior to every one of these matches. The announcers did a great job of hammering home the points of the storyline, and I just thought every time they had anything to do with each other and they were on opposite sides, it was magic and it was money. So my hat's off to Shawn Michaels and Triple H for giving us one hell of a rivalry, and it was fun to kind of go back and look at some of these matches again. I have not watched that Hell in the Cell match from 2004 in I don't know how many years. Probably 10 years was the last time I've actually watched that match straight through. SummerSlam, same thing. So thank you, John, for this video request because it gave me a chance to go back and relive some of these awesome moments, and it really makes me pine for the old days. I was more of an 80s and 90s guy. The early 2000s and mid 2000s were, not that important to me personally as a wrestling fan. But when I go back and look and see how good these matches are, I really need to pay more attention to some of those years. There was some really good shit in 2003, 4, and 5, and I don't think I give those years enough credit sometimes. But Shawn Michaels and Triple H are, two legends in the company. They've seen each other through thick and thin. Triple H inducted Shawn Michaels into the Hall of Fame in 2011 in a very, very touching speech. And they still interact on television to this day. It was just a few weeks ago that they were both in Saudi Arabia at Crown Jewel taking on the Brothers of Destruction. Shawn Michaels actually returned to the ring with a bald head just a few weeks back, which I'm still not completely sure how I feel about, but he remained retired all the way up until this year in 2018. So I guess the jury is still out if we see Shawn Michaels again. Anyway, I think that's going to wrap it up for this episode. Again, John, I want to thank you very, very much for this video idea. Like I said, it was fun just to go back and kind of discuss these things and, pull up these matches. Like I said, just go back and watch some of these. If you have any comments or any specific memories you have of these matches of the Rivalry. Please leave them in the comments below if I left anything out, because this was, kind of freestyle here. I was jotting down some notes and going mostly by memory. So if there's any match that I missed, please let me know about it. But I think I at least touched on the key points of the Rivalry and the history between the two. Thank you very much to all of you for listening to this. And thanks again, John, for your generosity. The next Patreon video I have planned is coming on December 30th. And that's going to be an interesting one. I think you guys are going to be about as baffled about it as I am to do it, but I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be a lot of fun. So thanks again for hanging out with me tonight. It was a lot of fun. I will talk to you all very, very soon. Until next time, peace.
This has been a Good Mic Work Commentaries production. Be sure to subscribe on YouTube at youtube.com/GoodMicWork. Follow Greg Morgan on Twitter at GoodMicWork and visit GoodMicWorkCommentaries.com for all the latest podcast and video content.